Shalom, benvinguts a AlHayam, un podcast sobre Israel, Palestina i l'Orient Mitjà,
Som en Paul Sánchez.
i l'Ofer Laszewicki.
Aquest projecte es sosté amb les vostres aportacions. Pots recolzar-nos al nostre perfil de Patreon a partir de 5 euros al mes.
Shalom, benvinguts. Shalom, Paul. Estem novament en un capítol especial, un capítol que gravem aquí a la Casa Adret, a Barcelona, a la seu de Mosaica, i on tornem a fer un format que ens va agradar molt i que vam fer recentment amb un grup d'educadors jueus i musulmans de Yad Beyat, d'Alemanya. I en aquest cas, Paul, tenim aquí amb nosaltres la sala plena d'un grup magnífic d'estudiants de Paideia, que és una institució que promou els estudis jueus a Suècia, a Estocolm. De fet, tu i jo hem format part de l'incubator de Paideia i va ser una experiència vital superinteressant. I ara tenim aquí amb nosaltres 4 perfils dels participants d'aquesta visita, on han vingut a passar una setmana aquí a la Casa Dret, amb Mosaica, i on tots els nostres partners, col·laboradors, han pogut presentar els seus projectes. Havien d'anar a Girona, però han tingut el temporal de vent, així que l'activitat, malauradament, es va cancel·lar. I bé, aquest és l'últim dia d'activitats i bé, volíem, evidentment, com a AlHayam, també formar part d'aquesta experiència i portar veus, que ara sentireu, de països molt diversos, països on probablement els nostres oients no tenen consciència ni que hi ha vida jueva i que no estem habituats a sentir-ne, per tant, tenim molta curiositat. Així que, bé, fins aquí la part en català de l'episodi. Ningú m'està entenent ara mateix. No one is understanding. So now, Paul, we will change to English, and you can better introduce our participants and also start the conversation.
Understood. Well, hello to our audience here today. Hello to the audience at home. For those of us who listen to us in English. Recordar, abans de fer el canvi a l'anglès, que aquest episodi, com sempre, farem una transcripció i traducció del guió al català, però ara canvio a l'anglès pel benefici de l'audiència. I'm just informing the audience that this will be transcribed and translated into Catalan. So, welcome. Today's conversation, as often introduced, taking advantage of the presence of the students of the one-year program of Paideia, Ofer and I decided it would be a good opportunity to give an overview / debate / conversation about what it is to be a Jew in Europe today, a modern European Jew of which we are all specimens. And for that, I'm now going to introduce the 4 people that we have selected from the group to converse with us. The way we're going to do this is I will introduce you with one line, and then I'm going to ask you to answer a question. So the question is going to be, if you had to describe your Judaism in one word, what would you choose and why? So with that in mind, I'm going to introduce you one by one. Ofer will pass you the microphone, and we will hear from you. So first of all, Revati Campbell. Revati is a Glasgow-based law student, and she serves in global Jewish leadership while advising on national policy in Scotland. She's also a self-described mixed-race Asian Jew. So if you had to describe your Judaism in one word, what would it be and why?
Thank you for that introduction. It's actually pronounced Revati.
Oh, well, sorry about that.
That's okay. I would say probably evolving.
Evolving.
Yeah. Oh, you want a why as well?
Yes.
Yes. I would say my relationship with Judaism has been maybe an evolving roller coaster, has increased, decreased over the years, depending on what the issue is, whether it was more increasing with connection to youth groups or whether it decreased because I wasn't living around a community, but then also increased on a more political combating anti-Semitism level. So it's always changed and explored different facets of what it means to be Jewish.
Mm-hmm. And you live in Glasgow now, but where were you born?
So I was born in Australia, and I grew up between Australia and Sri Lanka. But I've been living in Scotland since I was 14. My mum is a Sri Lankan Jew, but she's also half Scottish.
Fantastic. Okay, moving on. Next, we have got Oscar I've not written down your surname. Oscar, what else?
That's fine. Oscar is fine.
Okay, you're just going to be Oscar. Mysterious, the mystery guest. Oscar is a philosophy and economics student in Germany, researching anti-Semitism and shaping Jewish student life and public policy discourse through your research and your, can we say, activism work. So tell us, what is your Judaism in one word and why?
That's a very tough question to answer, I think. I just went through a few alternatives in my head, and I think I'm going to go with typical, because that's something that I feel resonates with many people. It's typical, but really only to me. But I say that because my Judaism or my Jewishness is very much shaped by things that surround me, my family history in Germany, the surrounding that I grew up in Germany, and so it is typical to a degree to German Jewry, I think, to European Jewry, to Jews from my family. There's a lot of types, but in the end, it's really just mine, I think. I don't know if this makes sense. I'm really struggling with the answer to this question, I think.
It's good. It's good. You're here representing the mean. Okay. Next we have got Lizaveta Marduchovich from Belarus, a Belarusian Jewish educator and community builder. She's led dozens of youth programs and international initiatives shaping for young Jews. That sentence didn't make sense. I wrote this in a rush. Basically, you lead youth programs for young Jews in Belarus. So tell us, what is your Judaism in one word and why?
Thank you. I feel that the word for me is traditions in plural. I feel like Judaism for me is traditions and rediscovery of the traditions, coming from a family that's not traditionally that Jewish, but haven't been Jewish for some generations. And for me, and I feel for my family, it's a constant rediscovering the history and the traditions and the Jewish rituals.
Okay, thank you, Elisaveta. Nice. Lastly, we've got with us Christian Sugar, a Budapest-born tour guide who discovered his Jewish roots at age 19. We will talk more about that because that's a very interesting journey. Christian now brings Hungary's Jewish history to life for visitors from around the world. So, Christian, what is your Judaism in one word and why?
Yeah, I also struggled with this, but let's say questioning. I question everything, every time, everywhere. It's not always pleasant, but that's how it works more for me, that I have more question than truth that I discovered. But basically your question is how I relate to my Jewish roots. I would say it's not unique in Hungary, but not even typical. So this kind of pattern exists that people don't know about their roots.
Can you explain a bit why? For someone who maybe has never heard of such a thing.
Relatively many survivors exist in Hungary. I mean, compared to Central Europe.
Of the Holocaust, we're talking.
Yeah, of the Shoah, of the Holocaust. And so life had to go on, show must go on, as it's sung. And so one way of survival is I wouldn't say forgetting, but let's not how do you say, put the trauma to the next generation. I think that was the good intention of my parents, because they got it from their parents and it was not pleasant. Especially I know my mother's story. So even from the age of 0, she had to hear it on and on and on from her mother, who was a Holocaust survivor. So my mother wanted to save me from the same story. So she chose another strategy. I think this strategy also doesn't work, but I see the good intention in it. I wouldn't say it's so typical, but I'm not the unique and only person who, that's why, doesn't or faces the Jewish roots only at the age of adolescence or early adulthood. So me and my family, we are baptized as well for the same reason.
Mhm. Okay, fascinating. Thank you for that. So we've got here, we said Revati is the, what was it? Evolving Jew. Oscar is the typical Jew.
Like,
I,
I like this.
I like the typical Jew. Lizaveta, we said, is traditions Jew and questioning Jew for Christian. Ofer.
From the following, I'm really interested on what you're explaining. From my perspective, I have a similar story to yours, but different. I was born in Israel. Also, my mother is a daughter of the Shoah, and also the story was not so like told to us because of the trauma. Also, the survivors that came to Israel after the Holocaust, as you all probably heard, endured like not an easy journey. Let's say it was a taboo. It was not an issue discussed at home and nor publicly, like nationally. Let's say. So I was interested on what you were explaining, and I would like to hear from you to develop more of how your country, as a country in general, is dealing with the memory of the things that happened there in the Holocaust. I mean, in general, I mean, I recently came from a visit to Poland, and it was not easy. The dealing with the memory there is full of controversy. So may you can tell us a little bit of how these issues dealt in your home country.
Me or the others?
You can start.
Okay.
Then we will take like topics and we will pass the microphone to each of
So
you.
your question is how Hungary deals
Mhm.
the memory of Holocaust.
Yes, definitely.
A lot of change happens, of course, in the course of times. Hungary is, let's say, a post-communist country, but not in a sense like Belarus. So Hungary was not part of the Soviet Union. So I guess there are different layers. But as far as I know from the history, so from some years after the end of the war, there was a, let's say, communist or socialist dictatorship or state socialism where this was not a topic. This is simply not a topic. Attending services, it was allowed, tolerated, not promoted, not forbidden. Sometimes it was dangerous, sometimes not. Same fate as the Christian religion. But as far as I know, there was, in a social level, there was not facing with the Holocaust, unlike, as far as I know, in Germany in the 1960s. So it was told in the society, fascists did it, and there were very extreme narratives. Either Hungarian people collectively as a, how do you say, sinners, or the opposite narrative. It was after the change of the political system from the 90s that we didn't do anything. Germans, Nazis are to blame, or the Hungarian fascist people are innocent. So these were the extreme narratives. So as far as I see, there is no real facing. This was your question?
Yeah, definitely.
Sure. I actually have a question for Oscar now. Oscar, you have, as I understood from your profile, you have worked in student politic groups, but you've also volunteered in Jewish kindergartens. Which do you think is more influential in giving shape to modern Jewish life?
That's a very interesting question, an important one probably. I think generally both are very important. from just my own experience, I can say that I found my work in the kindergarten specifically rewarding, not only personally, but I was really had the feeling that I did something for a Jewish community, Jewish children, you know, Jewish education. Whereas in my work as a university in university politics or whatever words you want to use, I often felt that I was like the position I held was created for in the year of where Bavaria celebrated 1700 years of Jewish life in Bavaria, and there was this initiative to create a position for Jewish life and against anti-Semitism in the student council. But this was really all there was to it, right? There was this occasion, and then there was this post created, this position created, and I was elected to do that. But there wasn't much intention behind it beyond that. I think there was it was more of a symbolic act, and I feel like that's in Germany. That's not always, of course, but that is something that tends to happen. That you want to have the position, you want to have the person, but it's there's I didn't feel like there was a deeper or a deeper intention behind it. Maybe I didn't make the most of it. Maybe it's my fault, but.
Okay, so could we say then that you felt you were doing more work in the kindergartens?
Yes, that's what I was getting at.
How so?
I mean, in the kindergarten, I met children from Jewish families, or at least partially Jewish families, who want their kid to be educated in a Jewish setting, or from very early on, which is something that I didn't have. I was educated in states, in the state system, like the public system, for most of my schooling up until 14, 15. So I found that really special, like the just this relationship you have with the children, and the ability to create a surrounding that is open. You know, it wasn't it wasn't an Orthodox kindergarten. It wasn't a closed community in that sense, but.
Do you think we're showing Jewish children to relate to their Judaism more defensively or aspirationally?
At the age of 3 and 4, I think it's not defensive yet.
Yet?
No. I think after that, there is some defensiveness that's introduced. I attended a Jewish high school from the age of 15, and there are these, you know, tales of caution or what you described, but not without any any reason or any importance, I don't think. But at the age of 3 and 4, it was a lot of challah baking. It was a lot of you know, singing Hebrew children's songs and doing like bracha over the meal, or I found that was very positive and.
Yeah, and at some point
lively.
that is perverted, you know, by adult life or politics. Do you feel do you feel that your approach to Judaism through your work, your experience, is it more intellectual, more political, or existential?
Wow. I think both. No, I think the two are very, very intimately intertwined. Like just the Jewish, there is an intellectual dimension to the Jewish, like the you call it personal, right? Yeah. Right. I think the two are not that easy to separate. Just generally, and I try to engage with all of these aspects.
Fair. Elisabetta, question for you. You are part. You organized many camps, events for Jewish youth. Do you believe that Jewish identity is formed more through a study, ritual, or more like in this kind of activities, or maybe it's a combination of both things? How do you relate to that?
This is the question that we continue to discuss in Paideia, and the thing that many kids that were participants in these camps and communal activities, they don't know anything about the Jewish culture. This is the question why they go to this place. I feel like the Jewish place, in many sense, they see it as a safe space to just be heard as a teenagers, as a kids. We've discussed the heritage breakage that I feel is present in our society, and I feel like many of the teenagers and kids get to know Judaism and Jewishness in these spaces. It is, for me, it is interesting how they choose to be a part of these events and community gatherings. Thinking about that, it is interesting how they find the connection, because they're maybe it's their great grandparents who were Jewish, and why they decide to participate in this. And yes, this is.
I feel I met someone from Prague a few days before, and it was for me surprising to hear how the youngest generations now feel that they carry on the responsibility of keeping Jewish life alive, actually, and teaching and promoting after all the tragic events that happen in Europe, also Eastern Europe, of course. You train both youth and kids in Belarus, in Eastern Europe, and also in Israel. You did many activities there. So how do you think that nowadays Israel influence on the identity of European Jews today, including in your communities in Belarus?
Yes, I wouldn't say that I organized something. I maybe was a participant in Israel, but yeah, this is something that I thought about right now. That I feel most of the projects were the projects of the joint, the GDC, and I grew up in this setting that in camps and the Jewish calendar in the community, Jewish holidays and Israel holidays were the same holidays that we grew up celebrating both. And for me, I grew up with this identity that Israel is the component as one of the pillar of the Jewish identity. And as I grew up in it, I feel that in community we shared the same thought.
Just building on that, what do you think is something about the European Jews' relation to Israel, generically speaking, that the broader audience doesn't understand?
Sarah, can you
Yeah,
maybe...
what do you think it is? Do you think there's something about the way Jews in Europe relate to Israel that is often misinterpreted or that people don't understand?
I feel like this year in Paideia, it's a year for me to see on a different side and many of the things about Israel. And I feel like in our community we talk about the bright side of the history of the personalities and the people, and I'm this half a year reflecting of what is done, what is said that maybe it is said from one view, but not considering the other side of this difficult question.
Well, for sure. Okay, Revati. Let's see. We want to hear more about your background. It's very unusual. You said your mother was a Sri Lankan Jew. Is that a numerous community?
Is it a what? Is it?
A large community?
Not at all. It's tiny, non-existent. I guess a little history lesson is the Jewish community in Sri Lanka started from the Dutch East India Company. So a lot of the Jews there belong to an ethnic group in Sri Lanka called Burghers, which are just like a Dutch Sinhalese ethnic group from that period. And so a lot of the original Sri Lankan Jews have all left. They all went to the UK. They all went to Australia. My family was one of those. And so a lot of the Burgher Sri Lankan Jews were very involved in politics and history and education, and then all left during the Civil War, the various civil wars.
Okay, interesting. And so as somebody navigating multiple identities, as you surely do, have you ever felt a tension between more universal commitments like human rights or feminism, for example, and a particular Jewish belonging?
It is the fundamentals of my existence, my identity, those tensions. Like I said, I'm very mixed race. My mother was the original mixed race Asian Jew, the OG. She is, like I said, she's a half Sri Lankan Jew, half Scottish. And then when it came to me, she decided to have my biological father be Chinese. So there's that, but then also being a woman, being a Jew, all of the above. And so it was, very inevitable that I went to law school and I focused a lot of my studies on human rights, on equality law, because it's something that I'm very passionate about. But I think especially in the last 2 years, with October 7th, I felt a lot of tensions, a lot of push and pull in different directions of what it means to be involved in those spaces as a mixed race person, as a woman, as a Jew. For me, the majority of my life, it's always been pretty simple that those parts of my identity aren't separate, that they are one and the same within myself. When I've discovered in the last 2 years, they've been very much so divided into silos. And that being someone who is from a family from a colonial history, and being involved in human rights, that being a Jew and being a supporter of Israel has been viewed as in opposition to a lot of that.
Maybe it's been viewed as contradictory.
Pardon?
Do people view it as contradictory?
People view it as very contradictory, but I think further than that, they view it as a betrayal. How can you say you're a feminist and be involved in certain Jewish spaces? How can you say that you're anti-colonial and supposedly support an apparent colonial state? Yeah, I mean, from my own community, from my own Sri Lankan community, I've been called a race betrayer before. Race betrayer before, that I have let down my own family's history and everything from that.
Do you feel this is something inherent to the Jewish condition?
The tension,
yeah, maybe what I mean is maybe this the exclusive nature of belonging to the Jewish people. It generates friction and tensions with one's other identities, even though people nowadays like yourself are very mixed.
I think it shows that as a community, not just the Jews, but as the world, that we still have a lot to do about showing representation and understanding of what it means to be Jewish, outside of just the level of are you Ashkenazi, you Sephardi, you halalically Jewish, but also that there are different facets that intersect to become Jewish. And that even I'm like internally within our community, like you said, my background is very unusual. A lot of people I'm not just the first Jew, I'm the first Asian Jew for a lot of people. I'm the first Jew in Scotland. That there is still a lot of really narrow understandings within the community, outside the community, of what it means to be a Jew. And often leads to a lot of inappropriate questioning, if I'm being honest. about my Judaism, about my relationship with Judaism, my legitimacy as a Jew. And so, but I don't think the answer to that is only within the community. I think it really goes hand in hand with dialogue between non-Jews and Jews about what it means to truly be what a Jew is.
If you think of Jewish community life in the next generation of European Jews, for it to be successful, what would you preserve at all costs, and what would you quietly let go of?
What would I preserve in European Jewish identity?
What would a successful Jewish community life in Europe look like in, say, 25 years? What do we have now that we should treasure, and what do we have now that maybe we could let go of?
I think maybe this doesn't just apply to Europe, but on a greater scale to world Jewry, I think we need to get our priorities straight in terms of what is actually worth our time and energy. I don't think it's any secret that there's a lot of internal interfighting amongst the community between different denominations, between shuls, between, again, like what we're talking about, legitimacy of Judaism. And yet we live in a time, especially now, where we're in a life and death situation of Jews. I've been at the forefront of a lot of those fights against anti-Semitism in the last 2 years, being in the Jewish student advocacy world. And yet there's interfighting still persists. And I think that we're not doing ourselves a favor. We're really...
What describe interfighting?
Interfighting between, like I said, between shuls that further divides our community, or between denominations, or between, even just between, like, this is just an example, I don't know if this is true, but like if French Jews have arguments with German Jews about like what it means to be truly Jewish or what it means to be truly Zionist, like our own inner fighting is preventing us from actually being able to do greater work for the greater community. How are we meant to be able to combat anti-Semitism? How are we meant to grow Jewish culture? How are we meant to create these bonds with the rest of the world when we can't even do that ourselves? And yes, that's a very big, that's a very, very big thing to solve. And I don't think 25 years is going to do that. But I think it's about being realistic about, like I said, what is worth our time and energy, having a degree of maturity, if I'm being honest, about our priorities.
Oscar, well, we are actually, all of us, Jewish people all around Europe, living through really challenging times during after October 7th, of course. I think that we can share or in common that it was something, at least for us here in Barcelona, where things are really tough, difficult. We didn't expect to live this wave of anti-Semitism. We also related to this phenomenon, like what our ancestors lived like many years ago here in Europe. Sadly, we are back in this situation. In Germany with such a tragic past relating to the Jewish issue. How you personally, your family, your community have experienced this rise of anti-Semitism, also attacks that happened in communities, synagogues, Jewish property. I can imagine it's something shocking. Tell us from your personal experience what happened, how you lived that, and what can be done, if something can be done to improve it.
Yeah, I think because you said it's shocking, I think might be just me, but most of the things that have been happening, at least in Germany, but also across the world, they failed to shock me. It's I don't know if that's a coping mechanism or if there's something else going on, but I don't feel a strong sense of like disorienting shock anymore when there's an attack or not only against actually Jewish people, but people who are perceived as somehow connected to Jews or to Jewishness in ways that people don't like.
Okay, so we can also, I mean, with the same topic also, I wanted actually to share it as a general question. how actually, Christian, you lived these challenging times, or I don't know if actually in Hungary it was challenging or not, because from here in Spain we mainly used to hear about things happening in Germany or France or the UK, but Hungary or Belarus are countries that we are not usually hearing about in our daily connection to the Jewish world. So tell us a little bit how you lived through this last 2-3 years, the rise of anti-Semitism in Europe, in your country, and also if there are things that can be done to improve the situation. Yeah.
Yeah, and also in relation to your job as a tour guide, of course. You've been exposed to people from all over the world, Jewish, non-Jewish. What have you encountered?
I am lucky I live in a bubble. I would say that Hungary is, of course, we heard what happened to the world. Hungary is relatively a safe country. I used to tell it to my tourists. Of course, 100% safety doesn't exist. But for example, in Budapest, especially in the center of the city, you can walk around with kippah on your head. And it's still a bubble because I think basically every capital is a bubble compared to the countryside, but still I would say that it's a simplification. Oral anti-Semitism exists in Hungary. Actual not so much. I think partly it's because of the population. Immigrants from the Middle East, for the immigrants, Hungary is not a destination. It's not compared to Western Europe, it's not a rich country. It's partly to the politics as well. Unfortunately, this question is over-politicized, and the Hungarian government wants to make use of this situation that Hungary is a safe country. We should say thank you to the Hungarian government and so on. So it's impossible to separate it from the politics. About the Jewish population, again, I see a polarization. In the secular progressive Jewry, I feel still an anti-Israel sentiment. I think it's not 100% okay. And in the very Orthodox religious Jewish population, I feel an anyway pro-Israel sentiment. I think it's also not in the right place. So maybe it's boring, but I think the truth is in between.
Boring is good. Honestly, we want more boring times. What about, I don't know, Elisabetta, do you want to share us a bit about your experience in your country? How is the community doing? How have they lived these last few years?
I feel like nothing has really changed. Of course, we held some events, but in a society, I don't think this is something that bother average Belarusian citizen. I started to feel fear maybe going on the streets in Europe when I arrived in Sweden and in Barcelona, that I haven't.
What do you mean fear? Describe it.
I think in Belarus, working in a Jewish community and being the person that people know that you can ask to go on the Shabbat to, and I haven't. There wasn't a second thought to say that yes, I'm Jewish. Yes, come to the Shabbat if you want to see how we do it. But now I feel that I should take off the Magen David and.
But why? Why? It was something that you felt because you were here, like walking around the streets in Barcelona, and there was a specific thing or sign or feeling that led you to take this choice?
I feel and it is because of the flags and the writings on the walls. And this is something that I see, and I think I'm sensitive to this thing, and maybe it's a personality take, but to hide, to be silent, and just not to show off.
It's interesting to hear your feedback towards that because, most of the people who put these signs on the walls, they try to convince us that they are only anti-Zionists, that they are critics of Israel, but don't have anything against the Jews, which, of course, it's really contradictory many, many times, if not all. But then suddenly a Jewish woman from Belarus came here and have this feeling instinctively. And yes, it's all over. And no, this mix that we feel it and we see it going like to concerts on the streets. Even it's natural like to compare here like the Magen David with the Nazi swastika. It's something that became usual in our daily life here in Barcelona. And I'm surprised or shocked that for you it was something so impacting, like that. You say that it is something that it's not happening in your country?
Yes, I will think this is not that I see like anytime in Belarus, and maybe the people who start to speak about the 7th of October is the people who got to Israel during this past time, and then we've start to maybe do some gatherings, but this is not really the thing that affected us, at least me as a Jewish community in Belarus.
Mhm. Well, it's interesting because these messages, it's almost like we are speaking different languages that share the same alphabet. As in, the people that write the messages, maybe they think they are being anti-Zionist, but to a European Jew with more or less relation to Israel, some of the symbols they use read as Jewish coded as opposed to Israel coded. So yeah, there's definitely like a lack of understanding of our codes of each other, and yeah, that leads to this definitely this atmosphere of fear, of insecurity, of mistrust, also not trusting one another. What about Revati in Glasgow? How are things there?
How the community has been for the last few years.
Yeah, how have you lived the last few years on the street and in the community?
I think Scotland, in many ways, is a very, very unique community compared to what I think a lot of people associate the UK community with, which is London and Manchester. It's a very old community. If you go down to London, even when I've been in New York and I've told a lot of people I'm from Glasgow, they'll tell me, oh, my grandparents were from there originally. But they left. They left because it's a very aging community. It's a very small community, but a very old one. I think what Scotland has had a very, very specific flavor of anti-Semitism that maybe hasn't existed elsewhere in Europe, and in the sense that it has a very big issue with, I mispronounce this word all the time, sectarianism, like
Sectarianism?
issues between Protestants and Catholics.
Right.
Because of the historical Irish immigration to the community. Glasgow specifically has this issue. And if anyone isn't familiar, but like in Ireland and Northern Ireland, their flavor of anti-Semitism is to do with their war being viewed as a parallel to Israel and Palestine. The war has been used as a proxy for their own issues. And so that dimension has definitely traveled over to Glasgow. The two main football teams in Glasgow are heavily politicized, heavily violent. It's very known that there are issues between them.
Does it overlap at any point with Scottish pro-independence sentiment, maybe?
No, not from what I've seen, mainly no. But so because each of the football teams, one's Protestant, one's Catholic, one of them is very, very, very pro-Palestinian. and also happens to be green. Their team colors happen to coincidentally be green. And so from what we've seen, it's ended up being a Protestant and a Catholic issue, is then turned into an Israel-Palestine issue. And so it's been a very specific flavor of anti-Semitism where our relations with Catholics in Scotland has been strained, has been interesting, has perhaps been more cautious, whilst our relationships with Protestants, there's that questioning of, okay, is the support here because you genuinely support Jews or support whatever you think about the war, or is this an answer to weaponizing Jews, using Jews as tools to be anti-Catholic?
Interesting. Do you think it spills over into other Catholic slash Protestant countries, like maybe Ireland, or is this like a very much local Scottish phenomenon?
Very much so stems from Ireland and Northern Ireland. I went on a trip to Northern Ireland with the Union of Jewish Students, which is the UK Jewish student representation. And we went on that trip because of this proxy element that I'm talking about. The way that it's so interesting is that the way that one side in Northern Ireland responds to something, the other side will do the opposite just because it's the opposite. And so if you go to Northern Ireland, one side of remind me, Belfast or Dublin is in Northern Ireland. I'm being ignorant. Belfast, sorry. One half of Belfast, where more of the Catholics live, is covered in Palestinian flags. And if you go to the Protestant side, it's covered in Israeli flags. Covered. I really mean like every other house has a flag. And this is a tiny city that I can guarantee you knows really nothing about this history, knows nothing about the context. The Belfast community, the Jewish community, is amazing. It's beautiful. They're cuties. They're so lovely, but it's small. It's dying. It's even smaller than Glasgow. And I don't think they're very involved in those conversations. And so it's interesting that when you go there, this whole entire war is everywhere. And yet it's not something that directly relates to them at all.
I want to throw a generic question to all of you. Whoever wants to answer it or grapple with it, feel free to take the mic. How do you feel about the fact that so much of our Jewish life here in Europe is being decided by others? And in this case, like in relation to the Israel-Palestine conflict, it's being traced onto local conflicts. I mean, we have the same thing here with conflict between Catalonia and Spain, between left and right. What you've just said now between Protestants and Catholics is a very interesting example of the same. What do you feel it means for the future of the Jewish identity in Europe, that so much of how we are viewed is imposed externally and defined by politics? Okay, there's a deafening silence in the room. Christian.
Related to the population, the Hungarian Jewish population is big enough to be departed to several groups. It's a simplification, but there is a pro-government Jewish community, anti-government Jewish community, a third Jewish community who is against the two big Jewish communities. Of course, it's not like that, but I see this. So the same detail. So something politics in small. So I don't see common identity.
Any other thoughts? Or rather, maybe we can add some more nuance to the question. Do you think Jewish identity in Europe today is shaped more by external pressures such as politics, anti-Semitism, or is it more driven by internal curiosity and meaning? What do you think has more weight?
Due to this October 7, so the question before, so these external forces are too strong, I think.
They cannot be ignored, is what you're saying.
You can't ignore them, but so still the negative component of the Jewish identity, I think it's too big. That's what I sense in Hungary.
I feel a lot of people have been pushed towards their Judaism because of this the anti-Semitism, the sectarianism. Um, Even though there are people who might never have related seriously to their Judaism before. Um, what does this mean for the future of Jewish Europe? Is this a good thing? Is this a good way to keep people in the fold, so to speak?
I 100% agree with you. I think that, like you said, there's been this massive increase in people engaging with their Judaism. I can say for myself, when October 7th happened, I was on the leadership committee for the Glasgow Jewish Society, which is a Jewish student group in Glasgow that was always meant to be purely cultural, purely a home away from home. And suddenly our numbers increased twofold after October 7th. And we had Jews coming to our events who had never been to a Shabbat dinner before, didn't know a single word of Hebrew. They were technically Jewish. And in that sense, it was really beautiful. It was really beautiful to expand our community. I think bringing more people into the big family can never not be a bad thing. And it can never not be a bad thing. It's never a bad thing. But yeah, I do wonder, like, how that will evolve with our relationships being so associated and wrapped up with the war, with our timelines being so wrapped up with the war. Like, I can speak for myself that, like I said at the start, that one of my increases in my involvement was to do with policy and to do with combating anti-Semitism. And it's been something that I've been thinking a lot about, like, what is my Jewish identity? What is my Jewish life outside of the war? What is it like outside of anti-Semitism? And Paideia has actually been a really, really beautiful opportunity and a place to explore that, because for me, my Jewish identity has always been very political and existential. It's not been very intellectual. And Paideia has given me a space to explore that more intellectual, that more textual side that I wasn't very familiar with, allow me to explore my own relationship with religiosity, with even Sephardi culture. I should have said that Sri Lankan Jews are Sephardi, but it's not something that I know really anything about on that level. And so, yes, I think to answer your question, I think it's really good that we're having more people come into the community. But I think what's important is that we don't place barriers and questions around why and how they can stay. If the war is what brought you to more Jewish communities, that it isn't dependent on you taking a certain stance on the war. And rather giving that space for these newbies, these babies, to allow them to self-explore their relationship with Judaism, with Jewry, with Israel, whatever it might be, and actually like nourish those identities and nourish those spaces a lot more.
But I can guess it might be challenging, no, for these new youngsters, like to join in this environment where everything related to Judaism is connected directly to Israel. Of course, things there are not pleasant, no matter from which view you consider what happened in Israel and Gaza during the last 2 years. Even considering the fact that you mentioned, for me, it was really surprising what you experienced, like in Belfast, like this of a neighborhood full of Israeli. It's kind of looks like a football game, even like, okay, and it's something that it really also affected us here in Barcelona, in broader Spain, that everything related to Judaism or Israel and the use of the Israeli flag was close related to political interest. No, I mean, as in many places in Europe, the right and the far right was more defendant or connected to Israel because of their view against Islam, whatever, and the left more connected to pro-Palestinian movements, or at least here in Spain. So I can imagine that this polarization was or it's not easy to handle for those people joining now this not easy club like to join. If you can, you and maybe also from the perspective in your country to develop on this topic.
I yeah, I think it's difficult, you know, to because we do live in societies that are mostly not Jewish, it's difficult to know where your friends are. I don't think there are any friends of the Jews. I don't have that. I think that's an illusion to say that there are friends and enemies of the Jews. I mean, of course, there are edge cases where they really are, but especially in this context you talk about, right? The instrumentalization of the conflict in a political spectrum, or it is just a political thing, no? I think that some of my friends and probably even myself, you fall into this kind of into this state where you try to look for people who share your views, or who are, I don't know, on your side in some abstract sense, and that doesn't really turn out to ever be true. It's really, I mean, the word instrumentalization, I think, really applies in most cases. I mean, in Germany we even have pro-Israel leftists, but that can be an interesting crowd to be around. But even with them, I sometimes feel like there's something that has to do a lot with them. It's like a lot of compensation. I mean, in Germany, it's tough to not see any type of working with Judaism, working with Jews, with Israel and Palestine as somehow compensating something. But that's maybe that's a biased framing. But that's the impression that I've had through the past few years.
Very good. And Elisabetta, do you have any thoughts? No, nothing. Okay, you're good. Well, I think we're basically ready, aren't we, Ofer?
5 minutes to have a last.
5 minutes, closing questions. Okay, let's think. Closing remarks. How about this? Let's again look to the future. The question we earlier asked Revati, I would like to bounce around to the rest of you too. I asked imagine 25 years, the next generation of European Jews. What would a successful future look like? What are we doing right, and what are we doing now that maybe we should leave behind? Oscar, Elisabetta, Christian.
I can just start. I don't mean to promote where we're from, right? The institution we're from, but it feels natural in response to your question, really. I think institutions like Paideia were that are places of Jewish learning, like without any compromise. Well, maybe with some compromise, depending on who you ask. But that are
not the main thing.
No, yeah. that are really places of Jewish learning with very extremely qualified faculty members and like deeply involved with the community as well, but that are open to non-Jews or people who are in the gray zone between Jewishness and non-Jewishness. I think these spaces are really those that matter if we want to have a European Jewishness, a European Judaism that is confident and confident in its plurality, confident in all its opinions, So that's definitely something that I would love to keep and love to nurture, or love to see the Jewish communities of Europe nurture these types of approaches. I'm less confident about naming something that I think should be done away with, because I see behind everything that people are doing, I see a reason, and like especially in the Jewish community, I don't want to claim that any reaction is extremely unnecessary or unhelpful, except maybe what I was just hinting to in my last answer with this illusion that there are reliable allies. I don't know. I think to think of reliable allies is to think of is to really on the one hand hone in on this difference, right? They're not Jewish, but they are our allies. Maybe that's a relationship that's not as binary as that. And on the other hand, it can lead to personal disappointment, as I've seen with many of my friends. I personally have not had such experiences, but in my friend group there have been a lot of people like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I get it. Elisabetta and Christian, any thoughts?
So the future of the Belarusian community, I strongly believe that the future is with the youth and the investment in community leaders, such programs that we have here, the Paideia, our study trip in Barcelona. It's really a transformative experience for people that for all their life are in one box to go out to experience how different communities do their work and how they live. I strongly believe that this is the engine for the enrichment, the community. I hope to see in my country the representation of Jewish culture yad by yad with the Belarusian culture. There is a beautiful institution, Belarusian Jewish Heritage Center, that they create now online platform, the Belarusian Jewish Museum. Visiting Poland and Warsaw has inspired me to see such a huge and beautiful museum, and I strongly think that Belarus and its Jewish heritage and history can be the same size for Stor's museum, and it will be perfect to see how Belarusian and how Jewish culture is implemented in the life of Belarus.
Very good.
Last thoughts for Christian and Revati also. Maybe adding a little bit about what Elisabetta was mentioning about this mingling of people of all around Europe here at the Paideia one-year program, here also at Casa Dred, Mosaica. A little bit conclusion of your experience of these days. I expect or hope that it was positive. It was not, you can also mention that, of course. But yeah, maybe it's a good way to conclude the conversation.
Yeah, I 100% echo what Oscar and Lisa said. I think actually, I guess the positive response to what I said earlier to your question about that was a bit more negative, but is that I am such a true believer in Jews understanding more about other Jews. I think it's really, really vital for us. And Paideia is a beautiful example of that, like Oscar said, of us being able to talk to each other and find out about what the situation is on the ground for our community, but also the individual traditions and just what it means to be a Jew in our country, but expanding on that to another level, understanding what it's like to be a Jew in Australia, what it's like to be a Jew in South Africa. I've been very involved with the World Union of Jewish Students and the American Jewish Committee, and those organizations really make a priority of Jews meeting other Jews from other countries to understand what it's like outside of their own bubbles. And especially now with anti-Semitism, understanding that anti-Semitism manifests so differently depending on the historical, the political context you're in. And I think it's been really, really uniting for the communities that the spaces that I've been involved in, for us to further understand what it means to be Jewish, to have those closer bonds even stronger as a community. As a response, actually, I think it really negates a lot of that more intra-fighting by having that deeper understanding.
Wishful thinking is coming. I hope that 25 years later, not the anti-Semitism will unite or will enforce in the Jewish communities. But back to the questions. So, the Jewish society, Jewish word is very colored, united colors of Benetton. And of course, these are very good initiatives like Paideia or Mosaica, which are encourages the Jewish, non-Jewish dialogue and so on, studying the text. But Jewish culture is very, so it's very colorful. Apart from studying the text, other sides of maintaining a culture like dancing, music, cooking is also very important. And of course, Orthodox communities will definitely survive. So we will have Orthodox community. I wish they survive. Orthodox Reform communities. And my last wishful thought, I hope my community in Hungary will survive. This is the so-called Neolog community. You might never heard about it. It's a specialty. Once upon a time, it was an assimilation project. That time it had an identity, but the purpose was achieved. So this community has only, I see problems, because the Neolog community has to redefine itself. I hope they can do it, otherwise they will disappear.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, the four of you, for talking with us today on AlHayam. Really, we hope you enjoyed your time in Barcelona, your one-year study program with Paideia in Stockholm, and we're going to wrap up today's episode. Really, again, thanks for talking with us and sharing your very valuable experiences. I'm sure it's going to be very enriching for our audience to get a broader view of what Jewish life is like around Europe and the world in today's troubled times. And I'm going to switch back to Catalan for closing off. Gràcies per haver-nos escoltat una setmana més. Com sabeu, si us agrada el que fem i us sembla important, recordeu que podeu contribuir al manteniment d'aquest projecte suportant-nos al Patreon, sigui una subscripció gratuïta o a partir de 5 euros al mes. Aquest episodi, com tots els altres, es troba a les nostres xarxes socials, a Patreon, a Spotify, a YouTube. I amb això tanquem la setmana, una setmana més. Shabbat Shalom, Ofer.
Shabbat Shalom, Paul, and Shabbat Shalom to everyone. Thank you very much. Hasta la vista.